Hey, so I had touched on this a little bit in my video about the executive order that Trump signed into place releasing the classified documents on the assassination of JFK and Martin Luther King Jr. And I've actually been thinking about this a lot for months actually, but I hold off on it because it's such a hot topic and it gets people upset. But I want to talk about what it was like growing up in the 60s and 70s as a little kid during the emergence of the Civil Rights Act. And it could have been confusing. So before I go there, I do want to say that in my house where I was growing up, my parents might have been a little prejudiced based on how they were raised, but they didn't like it, okay? So the N-word was never mentioned in my house. And we had friends that were African American, and I guess you could say they were the token African American friend. There's that I don't know what you call it, but stereotype of white people. But keep in mind, at that time, there was not a lot of commingling between races, not like there is now. Okay, so my family itself is actually very diverse. My great-grandmother is Native American. My great-aunt was a Jewish refugee. I have an aunt from Vietnam. I have a brother-in-law who's black. My children are Middle Eastern, they're a quarter Middle Eastern. Their father's half. So my father-in-law, who's passed away now, but he was from Iran. He's Persian. And we were just not raised to act that way or treat people any differently. Okay, so not just the N-word was not allowed, but any kind of racial slur, whatever you can think of, we were not allowed to say that. And my parents didn't speak that way, and we were taught that it was wrong. You don't treat people like that. Okay, so the neighborhood that I grew up in was predominantly white. There was 2 black families in the neighborhood. One was a family, and the son went to my school, but where the streets divided for the other elementary school, they're talking elementary school, that family went to a different one, but they actually only lived right around the corner from me, and I played with their little girl all the time. As a matter of fact, they were a very nice family, and when the space lab went up, the space shuttle, we were playing in their backyard and said something about it. Her dad went in the house and got a pair of binoculars, and we got to watch that. He shared that with all of us. That was big news at the time. So yes, I played with her a lot when we were little, and I didn't play with the little boy when we were kids because I didn't play with boys. Typically I played with girls, but as I got older, he actually became a really good friend and used to give me rides to work in high school. And anyway, so my neighborhoods were segregated kind of only by default, really, because by the time I was aware of it, segregation was illegal. But just because a law goes into place, people don't just automatically pick up and move. And there was a black neighborhood kind of on the other side of the main drag through town. And that's just the way it was, because you don't just sell your house the day something happens, a law has changed. Now, I can tell you later on that people that I went to high school with were buying, their starter homes, because they were not big houses in that neighborhood where the black people used to live. And more black people, as time went on, did move into our neighborhood. We did have, one Asian family. I don't remember what country she was from. and we had a couple families where the dads were military and married Asian women and brought them back to the United States. So I went to school with a couple different kids from different families that were Asian Americans, I guess is how you say it. One of them is still a good friend of mine to this day. So that's where I grew up, and that's how I was raised. And just to go back to what I was talking about in my previous video, talking about, this was like my first experience because I didn't know anything about it. We, like I said, we had black friends, and they would come to our house for dinner, and sometimes, my sister and I would spend the night over there, for parties and things, birthday parties. We were always invited. And so we were going down into DC. We live near DC, and we were going down there on a weekend or something like that to go to the museums, the Smithsonian and whatnot. And we were driving through this neighborhood, and all the houses, like the whole block of houses, were burned out. And I said, what happened? And my parents, trying to be protective, my dad, he just said that a bunch of people got mad and they set the houses on fire. And it was confusing to me because I knew that if I got mad and set the house on fire, I would be in a lot of trouble. That was my first thought about it. So that's where my first, I didn't know what it was at the time, but thinking back, now I know what it was. It was the rioting after Martin Luther King had been assassinated. So sometime, I guess probably around the same age, maybe a little older, we had a live-in nanny to take care of my sister and I, and she was black, and she had a daughter who was the same age as my sister. And one day we were coloring, and this was maybe mid-60s by now, had to be mid-60s, it wasn't the 70s yet. And we were coloring, and Crayola used to have this crayon called Flesh, which doesn't even look like like any Flesh that I've ever seen. But anyway, they had a Flesh colored crayon, and obviously it didn't match the little girl's color or our nanny's color. And so we were talking about it, and the African American community, see, things were divided here, even between the community itself. That's when the term black started coming out. Well, not really, because we had the song Red and Yellow, Black and White, they are precious in His sight. But anyway, oh God, this man just walked out in front of me. Apparently not everybody in that community wanted to be called black, because she corrected us. She says, we're not black, I'm not black. Does my skin look black to you? Look at that black crayon, and of course she's not the color of a black crayon either. So we called her brown. Her color is brown, and these are little girls who know nothing, including her daughter. Her daughter was just as confused, so I think she wanted to be called colored, okay? Which we all know nowadays, you don't call somebody colored, okay? Because we're all colored one color or another, and that variation depends on how much melanin you have in your skin. But there was this definite negative connotation to that terminology, especially in the South, because, and I don't know if she experienced this. I don't know what was happening in Maryland because I wasn't exposed to it, but we do know in the South where they had whites only and colored markings on restrooms and water fountains and all kinds of different places where you could sit, and books that were used in schools, and I mean everything was totally separated. So there's definitely a negative connotation to that word that we understand now. But back then, that's what she wanted to be called. So fast forward a little bit of time, and now I'm in middle school. I think I was in like 7th or 8th grade. And there was a black teacher, Miss Wiggins. She was actually a really good teacher, but this particular day was kind of confusing again. So one of my classmates was doing a current event report, and she read this little news clipping about some children in a black community who were, I think it was definitely a church. They were there for church of some sort, of church function, and I can't remember if it was a bomb or if it was a fire, but these little girls died, these little girls. So she was reporting on that, and she called them little colored girls. Well, Miss Wiggins very indignantly was upset that she used the term colored, which, you know, up until that point I thought was the way you're supposed to say it because of what I was told by another black person, and she corrected it and said, no, it's black. So this is just over the course of maybe 5 or 6 years in between, maybe not even that, probably about 5 or 6 years. And so my point to this is, everybody knew that the N-word was wrong. Everybody knew that. And then there's another N-word that apparently is wrong too. It ends with the letter O, which even on documentations was put down. And at one point that was the accepted term because it was the name of the race. And we didn't even have Latino back then. You know, that wasn't even designated. There was Asian, the N-O word, white or Caucasian, and they said Indian for Native Americans, and that was about it. And you know, coming from somebody who really did not want to be offensive, who wanted to do the right things, and not always, and being a kid, you know, not always, it wasn't always very clear what was the right thing to do. And Miss Wiggins, when she went at the girl who said colored, you know, she said, well, that's what my parents told me to say. And, well, your parents raised you wrong. So it was extremely confusing for me because it wasn't my parents that specifically said this is what you call people who are from Africa or African Americans or people with really dark skin or darker skin than yours. You know, you don't say that. You know, it came from an African American woman who wanted to be called colored, and here's another African American woman who thought colored was offensive and you should call them black. And I don't even think African American was a term yet that was commonly used anyway. So, you know, it was very confusing, and I don't really know what else to say about that except that I personally have never wanted to hurt somebody's feelings just because of the way they were born. Never. And that goes beyond race. It goes for people who are just born differently. You know. So I think that my reason for putting this out there is just to let people know that we only have what we're given to work with. And if it's not right, there are ways to gently correct somebody. Like, I don't think that teacher was being very gentle in any way. Whereas recently, somebody did very kindly correct me that the H word for that used to be for intersex is no longer appropriate. And I had said I will never say that word again. So now it's the H word. You'll have to go back and look through my videos to figure out what it is. But the correct, politically correct term is intersexed. So I don't say that anymore. I didn't know it. I just learned that within the last couple months, and when you say somebody's ignorant, like I can remember growing up, you're ignorant. That's what people would say. You're just ignorant. Well, maybe, because really ignorance means uneducated or you don't know something. So there may be people who are ignorant. Okay? And being ignorant is not the same as being a bigot. A bigot is based on hatred, and ignorant is just a lack of knowledge. That's why I'm bringing this out, that some people are offended by things that other people say, not realizing that they're saying it because they don't know any other way, and we have to help them. And that includes me. And then there's buttholes who choose to act like that and use words that are not nice. Okay? So that's why I'm saying that. And that things have evolved over the course of my life of what's acceptable and what's not. And in the beginning, even in certain communities, it may not have been agreed upon until later. So I hope that this gives insight to somebody somewhere, having lived at least a little bit of life. I don't know, but yeah, I don't know. If you guys have any stories about anything like this, go ahead and put them down below. I would love to hear your stories.